Hey guys, this is Ruben Langdon, aka Dante from Devil May Cry, aka Ken Masters from Street Fighter, and also Chris Redfield from the Resident Evil series. And you are listening to the Kasanova Podcast, the #1 podcast in Hawaii. Jackpot.
The Kasanova Podcast, the #1 podcast in Hawaii, is brought to you by these contributors on Patreon. If you'd like to see more content like this more often, as well as more podcast reviews, impressions, early access releases, live streams, and original content, then consider becoming a patron today. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mekel Kasanova, coming at you with another phenomenal interview. In today's episode, I've got the true honor and privilege of interviewing the one, the only Koen Deetman from KeokeN Interactive. He is the CEO and the creator of Deliver Us the Moon. And it is such a phenomenal game. Like I honestly, if you're into astronomy, if you're into science, if you're into spaceships, NASA and more, and just have an incredibly creative imagination, this is a game you need to play. This game has been critically acclaimed from Red Bull, Eurogamer, Wired.com, and IGN. You need to play this game. It is absolutely phenomenal. Available on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, as well as on Steam. So, you're ready to do it. I'm ready to do it. Let's go ahead and welcome Koen onto the show. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mekel Kasanova, and I have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Koen Deetman of KeokeN Interactive. Koen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Mekel. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's also an honor for me. I always love to do these things. So, my name is Koen Deetman. I'm the founder of KeokeN Interactive, and I directed Deliver Us the Moon, all the development on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And man, go ahead and tell people where they can find you, plug the company, and let's talk about the game too. Like, let's go ahead and it's like, what platforms can people expect? Even though I know, but let's talk about what platforms that people can expect the game on, and what can they expect with the experience of the game.
Well, first of all, the game is going to be released in, I think it's 2 weeks or next week. No, it's even next week already. It's the 10th of October.
Yeah.
It's going to be released on Steam, on PC, and will be followed next year by consoles. So, yeah. And I would say... it's if you ever dreamed of being an astronaut, that's mostly like I've been. Mm-hmm. That's literally the experience I try to create, because studying rocket science was, I thought, a little more tough. So then I started a game company, thought it was like easier. So yeah.
Oh man, I see you have in your background you have a moon. I like the aesthetic of it, and the astronaut.
Yeah, of course. It's this is like one of the relics that was left over from like the traveling around. I literally, when we printed this, I went to the US for the first time to showcase there, because we're from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And I thought I needed something light. And the thing is, this is like a literal, the biggest flag you can print, and a flag material is very light. So that's why you can like literally stick it into your bag, and it's like not even a kilo. So, but it looks like a whole printed full banner. So That's why I was amazed by the quality eventually, even and with like the travel weight.
Oh, wow.
But now it's hanging in my like this is literally my bedroom. So
What? Wow.
yeah, I got the wife to accept this.
Oh man, like that. No, that's awesome, man. I love that background. I was like, because before we started, I was like, what is that in the background? It's really, I want to know what that is. And then now I see it, it's like, oh man, that's awesome. Oh,
It's the first promo we did ever. So when we first started showcasing, this is the first promo we showed around.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. And there aren't many games in the style. I mean, if hardly any in the style of deliver us the moon, because you think about it, there are a lot of space style exploration games. There are very few that take on a simulation style in the way of deliver us the moon, and I think you guys did a stand-up job with that. Like that's and that also goes into like I'd like to know more about the company, because a lot of people think, oh, if I create it's super easy to create a game company and make games. Like, yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into that too.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because when I started this out, it's around 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I literally was. It's weird. I can maybe start a little bit with my background because that's it kind of always stuck with me. But when I was 12 years old, I literally played like Counter-Strike and Soldiers of Fortune online, like literally in 2000. So that's like 20 years ago almost.
Oh, we're around the same age then.
Yeah. And I wanted to become the number one. I'm not sure if you know the GGL rankings and the clan base websites. It was like when you got $100 for like a big tournament. That was amazing, Now you can get $1 million, but whatever. But I remember I challenged myself to kind of figure out and find a team that was trying to get to the number one spot on the international ranking. And I literally collected a lot of people from around the world and solved and forged a team out of that. And literally 4 years later, so that's around my 14th, so around my 18th, I got to the number one spot. It worked out. So and I always played under the name KeokeN, and that's why when I was in school, I never really liked school. I always thought like, is there a way to get into the game industry? And I would say in the beginning years, like after high school, I just started like a janitor, man. I was like cleaning schools. And I was literally thinking, so how do I get in there? And there was like this first like study that was offering studies for like doing computer science, but then like with a little twist on game development. And I said like, well, let me try this. So and that was when I was 22. And that was literally after 2 years. So I was literally done with it already. I was like, I actually want to go work in the industry. But I did manage to get my degree eventually. And from that point on, I had some like internships done locally. But a good friend of me said, Koen, you just need to start your company because this is what you've wanted always. And that's the thing in the Netherlands. We have for me, this is my own perception, of course, but we have one very big developer, and that's called Guerrilla Games. They made Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, or Killzone. And I always thought, like, why are they the only one that are this big? And of course, we now have Nixis, who's doing work on the Avengers, for example, coming up. But still, I felt like, why is nobody trying? So that's where I was like, I'm gonna try this. So But now 6 years later, I understand how hard that is. So, but yeah, Deliver Us the Moon is literally I would say we are debuting with something that was in my, I would say, 10-year planning, but we achieved it within 4. So I'm fairly happy what it resulted into.
Nice. And I mean, if we can step into the DeLorean and go back in time, like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it shows the difference between like, us growing up back in the 90s and 2000s versus, the current generation, where for us growing up, there was no clear cut path getting into the gaming industry. Like you had no idea how you were going to get into the industry. Nothing was ever, literally clear cut. It's like you read game magazines, you played the games, but we didn't have like, anything.
There was no guide.
Like literally, I'm trying to think of like how do I word this, because it didn't exist back then. It really did not exist. And when you stop and you think about it, it's like, wow, like people now, they want to get into the games industry. They can go on a website, they can apply, they can just, they can go to school for it. But back then, it's like, literally, like our generation paved the way.
I always like to think of the game industry right now as like a big wasteland of cowboys, and everybody's just shooting at each other. And sometimes you have like a friendship going on here, and it's literally like that still in some ways, So now you're right. It was it's kind of like, even today I'm still feeling like, but I'm actually, I do not really know what I'm doing, but somehow you figure out like the knobs on, so this is how it's going in the industry, and this is actually really hard. For example, we've just done like localization into the game, and we're just we've been a bit bigger. We've grown through the years with the team, because we had another publisher and stuff, but we are just 10 guys and girls in the office, and usually we're mistaken by the communities around the world, like, okay, you guys should have been 50 people studio or something, or maybe even 100 sometimes. But that's literally not the case, although sometimes the looks of the game are deceiving in that sense. So, but literally localizing a game, I mean, let alone the QA. I mean, how do you QA Korean subtitles? I mean, I love the Korean people, but I can't read. Or what's the difference between Chinese and Korean? And, is the script right, or is it missing some symbol? And that's, bigger companies have this all established a lot more. But we small guys, literally my level designer is doing UI, and he's QAing, and he's implementing a piece of localization, for example. So that's how people should think of indies in general, I think.
Wow.
Very creative.
Like, I was thinking, like, if you're putting something in Korean, like, if you're missing the character, like, how do you make the sentence structure, like, flow, And,
I know.
And with the size of your team, and then the amount of languages you're covering for localization, like, that's got to be stressful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's the usual thing nowadays in the team is that they are really fed up with like playing it over and over and over again to check out if anything is working. And well, that maybe that's something good to mention, is that we had a kind of a rocky road, man. I mean, we started literally from the kitchen table. Me and my brother were sitting there, and we thought like, okay, so we want to make this game company. What do we start with? So, and from there, we saw the first prototypes, but we weren't happy. We were working in another engine, and this is the weird thing. Back then I thought, okay, so if I can achieve it, then I know for sure it's possible because I've done it myself. And eventually over the years, you're kind of like challenges and your goals start to change. So you start to kind of push your barriers, and you start to hit some goals, but you forget about them because you've put your mind on something else again. I always call this like the never-ending task manager. If you have to do it on your own. And eventually from there, we got like a crowdfunding campaign set up. People telling me like, Koen, you're crazy. This is never going to happen. We tried for 100,000 euros back then. So a 6-figure Kickstarter without a track record. So people said like, okay, you guys should be crazy because that's not going to happen. But we were actually quite lucky. That was our overnight success where a large German YouTuber featured us heavily in there, and he even funded, I would say, at least half of the Kickstarter by himself with his community. And all those steps, because we had nothing in the beginning, and somehow the game is turning into this large budget game, and I can even tell you that the game was planned to be 4 months of project time, 4 months. It's 4 years now. So yeah, but I can honestly say if you go through all those stages, and with that money, we knew we could go, for example, to Los Angeles. We were invited by Microsoft on the E3 stage. And I said, like, all those steps were part of, like, what made Deliver Us the Moon as it is today. So eventually finding a publisher there, they raised the stakes by investing a lot more into it. We could grow the team to around, I would say, 18 to 20 people. Having to, like, break up with them because, they had a lot of internal problems. That was tough because we had to let go of at least half the team. So you kind of struggle for the first time with what do you tell people that worked their ass off on your game, and you have to tell them, like, I'm sorry, but I cannot renew you. You have to go find something else. And for us, that was like all new. You're green as hell, so you get all these experiences quite rough, I would say. So as the dream is still coming true, it's usually I see dreams being established less. They look always so nice and cuddly in your mind, but in reality they're a lot rougher.
It's true. No, and that's the thing too. It's like anytime you're pursuing something new or you're going to a new venture, especially when you're becoming an entrepreneur, and I'm experiencing a lot of this myself. You're always going to get the people that are going to tell you that, oh, you're crazy, it's not going to work. You shouldn't expect this because, I think I've been having this dialogue going on with a couple other entrepreneurs, especially this past week at HawaiiCon. I was sitting with a lot of a lot of celebrities and a couple of game developers there, and we were, I asked them, like, the process of going through creating something new, investing in yourself and embracing a dream and pursuing it. Like, why is there so much negativity that comes towards that with people saying, oh, you're crazy, you can't do this? And they're like, it's because it's outside of the norm. It's outside of the norm of what people are, conditioned to, get an education, get a degree, go get a good job and maintain that until you retire. Whereas a lot of us, we're just not built that way. We've got so much creativity, so much ambition that it's imperative for us to get out there and do it. And when you do that, you run into people who don't have that same drive. They don't have that same ambition. And so to them, it's crazy, Yeah. And it's just one of those things. But yeah, man, like that process, like, wow, like you guys, you did the fun and it went successfully, and then having to, the steps between that and to where you are now, like that's a hell of a journey.
Yeah, I agree, man. I even heard you talk in like one of those podcasts you sent me, where you said like how you also figured out, not wanting to do your like 9-to-5 job, trying to figure out how to start this on your own. And Man, that's the whole same process. I mean, every time it's getting better and you're not, that's the weird thing, because you will always see all the flaws you're doing, everything, like every little detail. But if I'm looking at it, for example, I can tell you it looks amazing, man. It's professional. There's the fact that sometimes something is overlaying with something. I already see what you're going for, but you see all the tiny bits, and that's the same with me. I mean, I have the same thing. But I think somehow that's what my brother always tells me. He says, like, it's like a painting. You just have to abandon it, and then it's finished.
I mean, I feel like if you stick with something in the sense of you're doing so much, like you're tweaking and editing, and you're just stuck, like, oh, I gotta, that perfectionist mindset. Yeah, you'll never finish it.
No,
you never will.
No, it's I literally got the question, what's the best time to showcase your game? And I said, like, well, never. Although it's also as early as possible. So the problem is you're gonna defend it as much as you can, but that's the thing. And usually when because we had like when we broke up with the publisher, we had like half a year later, we took a lot of time to finish our product, and we decided to release it ourselves last year on Steam. But we saw that was such a tough period to come out as an indie. And the thing is, only having it on Steam, seeing that our demographic and our target audience was a lot older, literally 35 years plus, people that not necessarily spend too much money on a large PC, but maybe have consoles at home. So we knew, like, okay, so our next step should be, we should get it to console. We should actually find a publisher that helps us out getting the word out. So without any marketing budget, and anything, we literally tried finding this. So this year at GDC, we bumped into Wired after countless of talks with others, and Wired was like, they understood us in some way, and I felt like the same kind of fight they are doing, like trying to make something out of themselves. Really, the love for games. When I visited their offices, I was like, oh shit, this is every little piece of like love and care is into their products. It's they're apparently they're 12 years old now, I think, or 11, and we're 6 years old as a studio. So I said, like, what I see is that the crap you collect like accumulates over the years. So at some point it's like a whole office full of stuff. But I really love what I saw. So that's where that kind of bonded really well. And nowadays, what we're now working up to, it's amazing. And eventually, that's the toughest thing. There's always a division between people that do not like your game or like your game. And nowadays we have like the whole store battles going on, with like Epic Store and like Steam. And I would say the thing about that is usually the customer thinks that's the different world. The gamer world is something so different from the developer part, because honestly, I would say if anyone in the industry in independent world is for money or into it for money, I can tell you that's a rare thing. There's nobody there that's actually there for money, because it's so hard to get it from a game or from an indie game that literally if an indie decides to work half a year or maybe even a year extra on their product without receiving anything, that's because they really love what they do, not because they want to earn any money.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I understood many developers how tough this is. And even up to AAA standards eventually, there is so many people that put everything into this. And sometimes deals are great, in that sense. And people try to help out. So, and it's really, you have to survive in this kind of wasteland and find allies in that sense to getting it out there. Yeah.
No, I mean, but it's true though. Like there is a big difference between the perspective of the gamer and the perspective of the developer. I've got a couple friends that have developed some games that have been exclusive to Steam, and it's like it's hard to get people to buy it on Steam, but the minute it comes on console, it's selling quickly. Like one of my friends, Seba Fighter or Sebastian Garcia, he created the Fight and Rage brawler game that just came to console, but it's been on Steam for years now. And I remember telling people like, please go and download this game on Steam. It's only $10, or it would go down to $5, but it's a $20 game, and people just wouldn't. They just I don't know if it's the mentality of some of the older players where I don't want to sit in front of my computer and download a game and play it. But the minute it came to Switch and Xbox and PlayStation, now everyone's like, "Oh man, this game is so amazing! Have you heard of it?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the game I've been telling you about for years now." But it's from everyone that I've spoken to, I've interviewed from like AAA, AA, and down to indie. It's really not about the money. It's really about the passion and the love. I mean, if you make money, cool, but it's really about the journey and the creativity of putting out, something that you're very passionate about and you love. And that's why sometimes, like when as a content creator, as a YouTuber and reviewer, one of the things, like when I review a game, I always try to show the respect and love that went into the creation of it, even if it's a game I don't care for, because I understand from talking to and working with and being friends with people in the industry, the amount of time that you can never get back that you've dedicated to creating this project, this game. It's something that it deserves appreciation. And when I see other content creators just like, oh, this game is trash, don't buy it, I hate that. I absolutely hate that. Like I and I was actually I did an interview with a PR rep for Capcom yesterday, and I was telling her the same thing. I said I absolutely hate it because it's and I don't care if I step on people's toes by saying this, but I feel like that's kind of lazy. Like if the developer can put in all this time, effort, and energy to create something for us to experience, why can't we put in more effort and energy to put out a better review, to detail and highlight, or at least see what they were trying to do, instead of saying, oh, it's trash, don't buy it. It's sad that as content creators and influencers, we have so much power to either make a game be successful or make it fail. And that is terrifying to me.
Yeah. I would say there's once been a journalist that came up to me that was so pissed at my game that I told him, like, can I ask you a question? He's like, yes. Do you think I made this game to piss you off? And he was like, no, I don't think so. I'm like, no, I didn't. I made it because to make you happy, to make you feel like an astronaut. So that's where he was like, oh, wait, maybe I'm looking at this at the wrong perspective. And I said, you're correct. It needs to be better at this. And of course, we need to make sure that it doesn't error here or has a bug here. Mm-hmm. But still, I didn't do this to piss you off. And if it pisses you off, do not play it, because that's not my intention. So,
yeah.
But that's usually, and I agree, when you buy something, it needs to work. And of course but in our time, man, when I'm starting to realize that how many things were just broken.
Right?
I mean, I have tried to turn off on my computer or rip something out, put something back in and see, like, is it now fixed? No, oh shit, I need a new graphics card, putting in a new graphics card. And then, yes, I can play Doom, But that's gone.
I mean, like literally thinking back to like when we were growing up, the games that we played, how broken they were. And, and I was saying this as PR person too, like we played a lot of games like NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, PlayStation, N64, 3DO, whatever. A lot of it was broken, but we didn't care because the game was fun. We understood what they were trying to do. And it's like now you got people, all they talk about, oh, what's the frame rate? What's the graphics? What's the resolution? And it's like, is the game fun?
Yeah. we're even the new RTX technology by NVIDIA, for example, that's something crazy because we've been with NVIDIA a couple of times. We're literally this year the only independent game developer that's releasing with RTX. So we're like, wait, what's the other game? Oh, Call of Duty, that's one. Nice. And we have Control, who released with it, of course. But then again, and there's KeokeN Interactive with Deliver Us the Moon. And I'm like, if I have to kind of explain to people how tough that is, they say like, yeah, but Remedy has done this. Like, yeah, but Remedy's 200 people. You know, I think they have their shader artists somewhere, and even them, it's still tough to adapt to new technology this fast. So, and then us, 10 people, who's doing this? So, but that's back in our day, we didn't like had those standards, Yeah,
we really didn't. Oh man, it's really about perspective, and I think a lot of the newer generation, again, I'm not trying to bash them, but if they feel that way, oh well. I think a lot of you guys need to understand where we've come from to understand and appreciate what you have now. Like, man, you remember when there were games like on the Super NES, you play it, and if it crashed, it could wipe your entire save. And there's certain games on the PlayStation, the Saturn, the PlayStation 64 and the PlayStation 2 that it was so buggy it would wipe your memory card. So it's like there are things that we went through and we still enjoyed them, and it's like, come on, guys, come on.
Figuring out in like Tomb Raider, where is actually the non, like, where are the pixels? Where do I have to go in? And then you search for walkthroughs, and then you're like, oh, there apparently is a hole somewhere here. Oh shit, I couldn't see that because there was no lighting, Right. I mean, all that stuff. But yeah, it's funny because in Deliver Us the Moon, I usually get like that people say like, hey, this feels like the old school adventure game, where you just set out on an adventure, you experience a lot of stuff coming onto you, kind of like a little bit like a theme park, And I always wanted that as well into the game, aside from like the reality of space and going like literally launching your own rocket. Of course, that's a little bit unrealistic, but still it has that idea, when you're going into space and you're floating in a space station. I literally wanted that. So, and honestly, we achieved that, and I'm extremely happy with the results for that. But yeah, that's interesting. So we usually get like the old school gamer onto this game very quickly.
And you remember the days before we had 2-hour-long tutorials where we actually had to figure out everything in the game? It's so crazy. Like I've run into gamers nowadays. They're like, oh, I don't know how to do this. It wasn't in the tutorial. And I'm like, you know how we figured things out back in the day? We had manuals. We had game magazines. We had tips and tricks. We had forums.
Yeah, it's true, man. Yeah, we've been looking everywhere to understand how this is fixed and finished and stuff. So yeah, it's true. That's and I have to say, like after my period of like a multiplayer online doing a Soldier of Fortune, I literally turned to narrative storytellers on like the earlier like the early console, the PlayStation, the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, eventually, and that's where weirdly enough, I'm very much a fan of like gore games like Gears of War, for example. But somehow I do not do this in my work. So Deliver Us the Moon is not violent at all. Although it's not, I think it's 12 years rated right now. But of course, more people in 35 plus range are playing this. So we could be violent, but then we are not. So this is like a really strange marriage we had here. Yeah.
Oh man, what is the engine that you're using for Deliver Us the Moon?
It's Unreal Engine from Epic Games. This is with I remember back in the day we had another engine, and we were debuting with a prototype that was not doing it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I literally asked my programmer, like, hey, can we take a look at the new Unreal Engine 4? Because I have a feeling that this might be the next thing, and they're onto something. So we started to look into it, and literally because they have like 30 plus, 40 plus years of experience, I felt that this engine like took me seriously a lot more. So I said, we should figure out if this is something we can work with. And eventually this turned out into the first actual prototypes that were presentable, in my opinion. And ever since then, we've been building up a relationship with Epic. And honestly, I'm actually very happy with them. Engine is, I mean, games that are put out there, they're first of all looking amazing. That's one. But especially, and that's something where I was maybe a tiny bit happy when Fortnite happened, because I never saw that coming, and neither did they. But I remember when that was becoming such a hit, I was like, oh, I became happy as a developer, because now I knew that the engine would seriously be backed by so many talent right now, because they were available, or they could do this already, but still now I knew I invested in something that had a good backing to it right now. So, and that's up till today, it's amazing to work with them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what is the team like at KeokeN Interactive? Like, how, what are the different aspects and personalities, and how do you all come together? Like, walk us through it.
Okay, so weirdly enough, I think everyone in the game industry is working hard, but we have this mentality of, we find it tough to celebrate successes. So what I see in the team is that's very alike. So most of us are very down to earth. So they, when something, for example, I have to tell them that we're quite a well-played team, oiled team. And when they, for example, add in technology that's like a week old, and they already invested it in the game and developed it in there, and it's already working without any problems, I tell them I see many large studios struggle with that stuff, and that we get this in so fast has everything to do with that mentality, that we're super great in feedback. So we can literally say something, and then we know, like, okay, so we have to do this again. And usually we iterated on a process already maybe 10 times before we realize it ourselves. So I think one of the qualities within all team members of KeokeN is that somehow we tend to avoid discussion on, we hold ground. So that's why I usually like to rephrase them to as T-shaped people. The bigger, like if you do a T like this, that means that like the long part is like your core skill, something like, I don't even know, mine is, I wouldn't say, I started off as like an artist and I did some programming. Wouldn't do that right now, by the way. I'm not that really good. But
lies.
The thing is, eventually what I said, like the level designer, or maybe even the audio guy we have, he's extremely good at making sound effects and composing, but he's also very good in writing. So he usually does some script work as well. But then again, he's also QAing and helping game design at hand. And the fact that we can do that with each other and make sure we kind of make a circle like that is kind of unique in the I think that nowadays we don't, for example, if I have to answer the question, do I need 300 people to create a AAA game right now? No. I think
Wow.
We're onto something. There's developers like us right now that are blending the lines, and that's because it's getting easier to make games and it's getting cheaper to make them as well. But still, it's also because people like this starting to exist. They don't abandon their creativity in other areas. We don't need a specialist in typical grass or something, you know. I think some of us might take that on a little.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And can we with Deliver Us to the Moon, with it coming out in only a short amount of days, like, is there any type of nervousness or anticipation so far, or like what is your feeling going into this release?
Yeah, first of all, I actually feel quite at ease, but that's because I'm backed by an amazing publisher. These guys they are working like as hard as us, but then like on the publishing side. And I have a feeling that that's gonna work out. And you can, hey, it's always good to have a deal and make sure that everything's good on paper, but somehow you can help each other out, like standing on each other's shoulders. So if we can help them with some things and they can help us with some things, it's usually not that much of an issue, like, oh, but that's your responsibility. That's never going to work. And somehow if you can build up on each other like this, then you quickly start to see what's going to be successful in there. And so coming on to release, I'm happy that it's out on the market again, and this time as a full experience. We added, I think, around a third more game to it since last year. So this is definitely going to help the community finding a resolution in our game, because there was a little bit of a cliffhanger in there. And I'm very curious what people think and what they think of how we finished it off. I think it's, well, I was not only me by seeing it, like, okay, I was like happy with how it ended, but also from like peers in the industry and companies, we get like the same message, like, oh, that ending fixed it, guys, thanks. Yeah, so I would say coming on to release, maybe I'm getting more anxious towards the release date, but other than that, I'm actually really happy how it's turning out.
Awesome. And when will we see more Deliver Us the Moon future? Possibly a sequel? Are there?
Well, first of all, we have like the whole RTX part that we really want to put in there and make sure that we develop it correct. So a little later in the year, we also released that whole part. But yeah, of course, we have always having thoughts running on different aspects. And us as a studio, Deliver Us the Moon was always set up as kind of more as a franchise idea rather than a one-off. So there is definitely a lot of angles we can take on, establishing on this project. So I would say, there's many ideas in the team how to continue this.
So this is going to be more of a technical question, but it's something I keep forgetting to ask when I interview a developer. But when you guys are making games, like for you and your company, when you're making this game, do you have to limit yourself because you're also making a console version of it, or is there a level of semi-parity between console and PC at this point?
I would say that it's starting to be very similar. That's one, meaning that the console versions more or less are going to be almost carbon copies of their PC version in that sense. I think the best way to answer this is if you want to create a great game or a good game, you should be limitless in the possibilities at first. So if you're starting to prototype, and that's, for example, in our next projects we're doing, we were so much into the polish mindset that you're starting to kind of close off certain possibilities, and that's narrowing your vision to make something unique again. So what I usually do is we should definitely find out any possibility, and eventually your prototype decides, okay, so if we're going to put this into pre-production and prepare for a production phase, that's where you come to know what are your strong points of the game and how do you scope that out, and is it something we put on animation as the heaviest, and that's eventually deciding how much work that is importing, for example. So if we do have a lot of dependencies on technical depth, for example, and that's because we have a very intensive system that's not really supported by a console, for example, that's where you make those decisions. So I would say definitely make the best game you can and then worry about how do you get this to another console. If it's going to be simultaneous or sim shipped, then or maybe even like cross-platform, that's where you need to take care of that it works all at the same time. But that's also mainly because the technique around engines is starting to be so good that it is possible to do cross-platform as easy, and not back in the day when like Steve Jobs and stuff were making games, because that's a whole different era. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So winding down to the last three questions I have for you. This one's going to be a bit of a curveball because this is going to be about you. So what are some things that you enjoy? Like what are things that you do for yourself, like to de-stress or to get away from, because anything that we love, eventually we need to take a break from it. So what are some of the things that you like to do outside of creating games and playing games as well? Like,
It's a good question, because you start to be a workaholic if you're an entrepreneur. And I remember before I literally lost everything I liked. So I used to play a lot of games and I didn't anymore. So eventually it's starting to turn out only about work. But it's maybe a little bit of a dull answer, but since I got married and got like my daughter, that's literally what I really like. So when I'm home, I turn into dad. Then I'm like playing around with her, or I'm, I don't know, coloring some things or drawing with her. And that's literally de-stressing me from the work, because it's totally different from going into these conversations or business things. And it's literally, when she came into my life, it balanced the whole spectrum for me. So besides that, I'm still loving games. So what I really like now is where my wife and I are on the couch and we're literally playing something we can enjoy together. The thing I played was like Man of Medan. You remember that's the successor of Supermassive Games.
Yeah.
It was good. We really liked Until Dawn, so that's why we tried this one out as well. And weirdly enough, this is because I'm a very big fan of Alan Watts. There's like this new game that came out called Everything, and that's from an indie, but somehow I really like the philosophy behind it, because this is all the way up my alley. But that's more of a solo experience, and but that's something I really like. And I tried an occasional Gears of War 5, but I don't find the time anymore to actually put in the hours, because then you're getting good, So, but yeah, that's what it is, I think.
Okay.
Lovely balance.
Yeah. And what are if you're allowed to speak on some of the projects that you're working on, but are there any other projects, with the exception of, additional stuff for Deliver Us the Moon that you're working on?
Yes, definitely. And but that's exactly, we cannot say too much about
Okay.
it because there's still that's the thing about me. I would love to share most of these things because I am very transparent, but sometimes I want to share it when it's really there and when it's
Mm-hmm.
really possible, because if you are hyping up people with enjoyment and suddenly it's not possible, for example, and that can happen with an indie, that somehow there's no funds or no budget, then you kind of, yeah, mess that up a little. So, but that's when I say we're doing something, it's currently it's because it's possible, and I'm working really hard to become that studio like Guerrilla Games. Let's leave it at that.
All right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And the last question I have is what advice would you give to our audience here that would be interested in getting into video game design and the gaming industry as a whole?
Yeah. The best advice is, I think I remember one saying it to me as well, is I once saw one of the founders of Unity talk, and he said, do not listen to me. This story is mine. And it's true. Everyone you see and the successes around you see are stories of their own, happened on their own. And I think if you rely on your own gut in that sense and you really want something, go for it. If you fail, maybe this is more applicable to my country, because failing in our country, for some reason it seems that people laugh at you if you do, but failing is the start of the whole process. I mean, that's, you need to fail a lot, and it's not a problem to fail. It's fine. You can fail games, you can fail companies. Try to be as responsible in failing there as possible, but definitely do not give up, because giving up, that's the moment when that failure is actually a reality, and it will always stay that. If you keep on going, then eventually you will get there. And without a doubt, you will find that happiness as well if you really wanted it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's definitely something that, is really prevalent here in the US as well, where people, they like to make fun of you if you fail. And it's like, failure to me, I don't view failure as a negative. It's to me, it's like it's a learning process. Like, hey, I could have done this better, or hey, maybe I should have done that, but at least I had the experience and I gave it an effort and I tried. I think a lot of people who mock those who fail themselves wouldn't even attempt.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if it goes so well for someone and eventually they hit maybe this lucky shot, the moment it actually hits harder than if they do fail on a lot of things, that's going to be a tougher one to overcome than if you gradually failed up towards your goal. So I would say failure is a lot of knowledge in there, a lot of nice baggage you want.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I lied. I actually have one final question for you.
Sure.
Did you have fun?
Oh man, great! I looked forward to this podcast, because I saw talking. I was like, okay, I think this is going to be a nice conversation. I enjoyed it, man. Thanks, Mekel.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and again, tell people where they can find you on social media, and then the game, and also I'm gonna leave links to everything down below in the description of the podcast and the video.
Yeah, so people can find us on at KeokeN on Twitter, on our website, deliverusthemoon.com. Of course, Steam, to wishlist it for a week still. And yeah, I would say we're very talkative on Twitter. We really love that. We try to answer as much as we can. And I hope everyone loves to enjoy to shoot themselves to the moon. Yeah.
Oh man, and Koen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. And people, please go and purchase this game, wishlist it on Steam, and also pick it up on console. You know, I'm very fortunate to have a review copy of the game, and I definitely am enjoying it so far. And I will have a review out around a couple of days after when this video goes live, which is in a few days. And with that being said, people, you can catch this episode of the podcast. It's available on all podcasting outlets. So that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SiriusXM, and Pandora. And with that being said, this is Mekel and Koen. We are signing out. You guys have a good one.
Thanks, Mekel, for having me.
Hey, did you enjoy this episode of the Kasanova Podcast? Well, I'm sure you did. And since you did, and you're wondering where else you can find it on every podcasting outlet. Yes, that includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Launchpad DM by Podcast One, and so much more. And the only thing I ask of you is if you truly enjoyed it, even if you didn't enjoy it, please leave a rating and tell us what you thought of it, what you like, what you didn't like, and everything in between. And also, if you're looking for video formats of this podcast and many more, you'll be able to find them on youtube.com/MekelKasanova, as well as on twitch.tv/MekelKasanova, and new episodes every single Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, with that being said, this is Mekel Kasanova, Hawaii's favorite YouTuber. I am signing out. You guys have a great one.